I sat in the corner of the grand hall, 3 rows from the exit, wearing a simple gray pantsuit that looked out of place amid the sea of decorated uniforms. Around me, brass buttons gleamed under crystal chandeliers, shoulders stood square, ribbons and medals caught the light. The air smelled like polish and pride and history. This was my brother Ethan Mitchell's ceremony, the golden child, my parents' walking trophy. Someone behind me whispered, "A real Mitchell," and another replied, "Born to lead," and I didn't even flinch anymore. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. They didn't see me. They didn't recognize me. To them, I was just Olivia, the family disappointment, the one who tried the military thing before disappearing into some vague government job no one bothered asking about. That was the story my family told so often I think they started to believe it. Maybe I did too, for a while. I adjusted my sleeve, fingers brushing where rank insignia should have been. Commander Olivia Mitchell, Naval Intelligence Division. But not today. Today I was just a shadow at the edge of my brother's spotlight. Up front, my parents sat like visiting dignitaries. Captain James Mitchell, retired, still ramrod straight in his civilian suit with the American flag pin on his lapel, and my mother Catherine, pearls at her throat, her hand resting on Ethan's arm. She looked proud, the kind of proud that could break a daughter if she let it. I had no plans to be noticed, no intention of being anything but polite and invisible. But when Admiral William Hayes stepped to the podium, tall, imposing, the kind of man whose presence filled a room before his voice did, his gaze swept the crowd once, then landed directly on me. It stayed there. He paused just long enough to shift something in the air. I didn't move. Not yet. I was born into the kind of family where rank came before name. In Charleston, South Carolina, that wasn't rare. Every other house in our neighborhood had a flag on the porch and a story about someone who served. But in the Mitchell house, service wasn't a calling, it was a bloodline. My grandfather commanded destroyers in the Atlantic during World War II. My father, Captain James Mitchell, led combat operations in the Persian Gulf and briefed Joint Chiefs. I learned to say yes, sir, before I learned to tie my shoes. We didn't take family vacations, we transferred duty stations. The living room was a museum of awards and folded flags, and no one ever touched the glass case that held his silver star. There were rules, unspoken but ironclad. Men served in combat roles. Women supported. The Mitchell men fought, bled, commanded. The women stood straight at ceremonies and kept perfect homes. That was the shape of pride in our family. It wasn't cruel, it was tradition. It was what worked. And I ruined the symmetry. I wasn't loud about it. I just didn't fit where I was told to go. While other girls were practicing makeup techniques or joining dance teams, I was in our basement configuring an old ham radio just to figure out how signals traveled. At 9, I beat Ethan in a strategy game our father brought back from Germany. The board disappeared that night. Dad said it was missing pieces. At 12, I started staying up after lights out, sneaking into my father's home office. He thought I was sleeping. I was reading his old field manuals and intelligence briefings like bedtime stories. I liked the way they made me feel like I was inside something no one else could touch. Then one evening, he caught me. I was sitting at his desk decoding a practice cipher from an old naval intelligence training module. The solution came to me quickly. I scribbled it out on a yellow legal pad and leaned back, satisfied. He stepped into the doorway. I looked up, smiling. "I think I cracked it," I said, excited to share. He walked over, glanced at the paper, and read the sequence. Then he did something I'll never forget. He laughed. Not cruelly, not kindly either, just that dismissive chuckle that turns your face warm and your spine cold. He ruffled my hair and said, "Stick to your books, Liv. This game is for the men who actually serve." Then he left, and I sat there staring at the legal pad like it had betrayed me. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. But something in me went quiet that night. Not broken, just sealed away. From then on, I knew if I wanted to be seen, I'd have to earn it somewhere outside our house, and maybe never bring it back in. By the time I turned 17, I'd stopped sharing anything that mattered. I still came to dinner, still asked about Ethan's training or Mom's garden club. I smiled in photos. I played the daughter well. But the part of me that counted, the part building something in silence, stayed tucked away. That year, I applied to the United States Naval Academy without telling anyone. I trained at dawn, ran 5 miles every morning, memorized ship specifications, solved logic puzzles during lunch. I didn't go to prom. I didn't date. I wasn't rebelling, I was preparing. And no one noticed. When the acceptance letter came, it arrived in a plain envelope. No golden seal, no fanfare, just words that changed everything. We are pleased to offer you admission. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I stared at it for an hour, not because I doubted I deserved it, but because I wasn't sure what to do with the joy. Where do you put it when there's no one to hold it with you? That night, I brought the letter to dinner. My hands trembled. I tucked my hair behind my ears 3 times before I spoke. Annapolis, I said, laying the envelope down like evidence. I got in. There was a pause, then my father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He didn't smile. He didn't even reach for the letter. You'll wash out by summer, Olivia. The academy isn't some high school debate club. He pulled out his wallet and set a crisp $50 bill on the table, then turned to Ethan. Bet she's home crying by week 3. Ethan chuckled, not mean, just comfortable, like it was obvious. Month 1, tops. Mom reached for my hand, her voice soft. Honey, you're so bright. You don't need to prove anything. You could teach school and be safe. Safe. I looked at the money, at Ethan's easy grin, at my mother's gentle retreat. The air felt thick. I said only this, I'm going. My voice didn't shake, but something inside me shifted away from them forever. They didn't drive me to Annapolis. Said it was too far, too much traffic. I took a train, 7 hours with a duffel bag and no goodbye hug. I watched them from the window, Dad standing with arms crossed, Mom dabbing her eyes, Ethan checking his phone. For a moment, I wondered if I was making a mistake. Then the train pulled away, and the station slipped out of view, and that thought never came back. Annapolis didn't ease you in. From the moment I stepped off the train, it was noise and order in motion, names barked, boots hitting pavement, someone yelling before I could even breathe. And I loved it. Not because it was easy, it wasn't. But because for the first time in my life, I was somewhere no one knew I was supposed to fail. Still, it didn't take long before the whispers started. She's not built for this. Mitchell? As in Captain Mitchell? She must be here on legacy. They didn't know my father would rather burn his uniform than vouch for me. During combat training week, I checked out my equipment and noticed something was off. My gear had been tampered with, subtly, but enough that it could have compromised my performance, maybe even caused injury. I flagged it, got told, maybe you stored it wrong. I hadn't. Someone wanted me shaken. It worked. That night in my bunk, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I was already starting to crack. 2 weeks later, during a tactical intelligence simulation, I was tracking a complex scenario when a power surge blew through my station. It knocked me backward, hard. The flash fried the interface, and my right shoulder took the impact against the wall. Pain radiated down my arm like someone had lit a fuse inside the bone. Diagnosis: torn rotator cuff. Recommendation: surgery, months of physical therapy, possible medical separation. I didn't cry, not in public. But in the infirmary, when the curtain closed and the lights dimmed, I lay there watching shadows move across the wall, and for the first time, I let myself wonder if maybe my father had been right. I wrote home just once, not asking for help, just trying to anchor myself to something familiar. I got a response 2 weeks later. Mom's letter was kind if you didn't read too closely. She talked about the weather, the neighbor's new fence, and a cousin's wedding. She ended with, "You've always been so smart, Olivia. Maybe this is a sign to try something gentler." No letter from my father. Nothing from Ethan. And then Commander Lisa Reeves walked in. She didn't knock. She didn't ask how I felt. She dropped a laptop on my tray and said, 3 intelligence briefs. Analyze them by Friday. I blinked at her. She pointed to the sling on my arm. You've still got a brain, don't you? That was how it began. Every week, she brought more. Harder problems. Tighter deadlines. Impossible scenarios. When I faltered, she snapped, the Navy doesn't need perfect. It needs pressure forged. I didn't know it then, but she was handing me the only thing I'd needed since the day I left home, a reason to believe I could belong even when no one was watching. I stayed. Finished rehab with physical therapy 3 times a week and determination every hour between. The pain never fully left, but I learned how to move with it, how to carry weight differently, how to type again, slower at first, then faster than before. I trained when no one watched. Studied while others slept. By graduation, I was in the top 3% of my class. I stood at attention in my dress whites, shoulders still aching on rainy days but strong enough now. My posture perfect. My salute sharp. My family came, just as they said they would. My mother wore navy blue and pearls. My father in full suit. And tie knotted with formality. Ethan was taller now, 21, still smug around the eyes. They clapped when my name was called. Quietly. No cheering, just polite acknowledgement, like I'd passed a test they hadn't expected me to take. At the reception, my father shook my hand like I was someone else's daughter. "You made it through," he said, his tone flat. "But the real Navy is a different beast. That's where we'll see what you're made of." I smiled, not out of warmth, just out of instinct. Then I turned away before I said something I couldn't take back. I didn't bring up my assignment to naval intelligence. Or the commendation waiting on my desk. They hadn't asked, so I didn't offer. Over the next year, I ran point on an operation tracking foreign infiltration of naval communication systems. Lives were on the line. Security was compromised. We contained it, barely. My name was on the after-action report, top line. That night, I called home. Mom answered, distracted. "That's nice, dear, but when are you thinking of settling down?" My father got on the line next. He didn't ask what the operation was, didn't ask what my team had done. "Junior officer is a stepping stone," he said. "Most don't last there. Don't get cocky." I hung up, staring at the screen, the commendation still on my desk. It was the first time I understood that they didn't just misunderstand me, they had chosen not to see me at all. That Thanksgiving, the house smelled the same. Turkey and sage, the faint scent of polish on the mahogany table. But the silence underneath it had changed. Ethan had just completed his first tour. His uniform was new, the insignia still stiff on his chest. He wore it like it belonged to him before he'd even earned it. And to my parents, it did. The dining room was already decorated in his honor, photos on the sideboard, a special toast before dinner, his future the only story being told. "Ethan's the real deal now," Dad said to one of the neighbors he'd invited over. "He's where the Mitchell legacy lives on." I sat at the table, wine barely touched, waiting for the right moment to speak. I had just returned from a classified operation that intercepted vital intelligence affecting national security. My team had received recognition at the highest levels. I had been promoted again, faster than expected. It wasn't something I could share fully, but I thought maybe some part of it could be enough. So I began, gently. "We just completed a major intelligence operation," I said, voice steady. "It prevented a serious breach. A lot of people are safer tonight." Dad looked up from carving the turkey, not cruel, just unimpressed. "Olivia's doing her desk job," he said. "Ethan's out there on the front lines, doing the real work." The room chuckled. Even Ethan gave a crooked grin. "Hope your office chair is comfortable, sis." I didn't answer. I just looked at him. He looked away. Later, in the kitchen, I helped Mom with the dishes. She handed me a towel and touched my shoulder like she still believed that was love. "You always were the smart one," she said softly. "Just not built for the real path." That was when it happened. I didn't snap, didn't yell. I just stopped. Stopped trying to be seen. Stopped volunteering updates. Stopped giving them the pieces they never wanted to hold. That night, after the pies were served and the neighbors had gone, I gathered my things and left without making a sound. No one asked why, and I never offered. The invitation arrived in a thick cream envelope. Inside, gold lettering spelled out what I already knew: Ethan Mitchell, newly promoted, would be honored at Norfolk Naval Station in 2 weeks. I let it sit on my kitchen counter for 4 days. Some mornings, I almost threw it away. Other nights, I caught myself rereading it, as if hidden between the lines was a reason not to go. My partner, Daniel, watched me quietly. He didn't press. When I finally spoke, my voice surprised even me. "I'm going," I said. He nodded, jaw set. "You don't owe them anything." "I know," I said. "But Ethan's still my brother." We both knew I wouldn't wear my uniform. This was his day, not mine. I chose a simple gray pantsuit, a white blouse, low heels polished but unassuming. Hair in a neat bun. No insignia, no pins. The rank and medals I'd earned stayed locked in a case back home. I drove alone, rehearsed my neutral smile, braced for Dad's comments, Mom's concerned glances, Ethan's easy jokes. At the base, I merged with the crowd, slipping into the line of guests. It was a warm day. The sun reflected off every brass button in sight. They spotted me near the entrance. "Olivia, you made it," Mom chirped, hurrying over. She wore coral, always the opposite of whatever I picked. Dad stood beside her, hands behind his back. "Glad you could show," he said, the way people do when they don't expect much. Ethan grinned and gave a half shrug. "Didn't think you'd want to relive old Navy memories." "I'm just here to celebrate," I said. Inside the auditorium, flags lined the stage. A string quartet played softly. Seats filled with officers, families, commanders. I sat near the back, third row from the exit, alone. Ceremony protocol began. Colors presented. Anthem sung. Names called. Then Admiral William Hayes took the stage. He was tall, composed. His voice had that calm, practiced clarity. He praised Ethan, outlined his performance, his leadership, his future. Then his eyes swept across the room and landed on me. They didn't move. His voice hesitated, only a breath, but I felt the shift. Something small in the air changed. He adjusted his notes, continued. I lowered my gaze, willed myself invisible. But I knew what was coming. The final words of commendation passed. Applause rose, then fell. And then came the moment. Admiral Hayes stepped down, walked straight into the crowd, toward me. He stopped. Saluted. "Commander Mitchell," he said. It was loud enough for the rows around us to hear. "Your Pacific Rim Intelligence Network saved my carrier group during the Tainan incident. I never got to say thank you." The room froze. Conversations cut short. Heads turned. Mom gasped, her hand flew to her chest. She staggered slightly. Dad stood motionless, jaw slack. Ethan didn't speak. He just stared like someone had rewritten everything he knew. More voices joined. "Wait, Commander Mitchell? The Tainan operation?" A younger officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, your protocols are now standard training in intelligence school." I stood up slowly, my pantsuit suddenly too thin. "Thank you, Admiral," I said evenly. "But today is not mine. It's my brother's." He paused, then nodded with respect. "Understood. But we know who you are." And just like that, the story they told about me cracked open. They found me in a small meeting room just off the main corridor, its door still half open. My mother was pale, one hand gripping the back of a chair. Ethan stood beside her, still in uniform, arms crossed like he hadn't decided whether this was real or not. My father was pacing, slow and stiff, like someone walking through a memory he didn't trust. When I stepped in, he stopped. "Commander?" he said, not loud but sharp. "What kind of game is this?" I closed the door behind me. "It's not a game." He took a step forward. "You let us believe." "No," I said. "You believed what was easiest. I didn't correct you." Mom spoke next. Her voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell us?" "We didn't know, Olivia." "How could we not know?" I looked at her, not with anger, just quiet clarity. "Because you didn't want to." "That's not fair," she whispered. "Isn't it?" I asked. "Every time I tried to share something, school, assignments, promotions, you shut it down or changed the subject or made it about Ethan." Ethan shifted, his jaw tightening. "I didn't know," he said softly. "I mean, I knew something was different. You talked differently, carried yourself differently. But I didn't ask. I guess I didn't want to be the second Mitchell." That landed deeper than anything else in the room. I let the silence stretch, not to punish them, just to let the truth settle. "I didn't stay quiet to hurt you," I said finally. "I stayed quiet to protect myself." Dad rubbed the bridge of his nose, suddenly older than I remembered. "You're telling me that all these years, while we thought you were just getting by, you were running operations like that?" "Yes." "And we mocked you?" "Yes." He didn't respond, just stood there, the weight of it folding his shoulders in. Then the door creaked open. Daniel stepped in, quiet as always. "You okay?" he asked me. "Yeah," I said. "They just found out I'm not a disappointment." He looked around the room, then back at me. "Took them long enough." 3 days later. The phone rang just after sunset. It was my father, not a message relayed through Mom, not an email. His voice. "We'd like to have you over," he said, formal, like he was issuing a dinner invitation to a visiting officer. "Just us. No neighbors. No speeches." I paused before answering. All right. That Saturday, Daniel and I pulled into the driveway I hadn't seen in over a year. The porch light was on, the steps swept clean. The door opened before we knocked. Mom greeted us with a hug that didn't hold too tight. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Inside, the table was already set, not for show, just simple dishes, cloth napkins, glasses of water already poured. Dad stood when we entered the dining room. I hadn't seen him rise. For anyone in years. "Olivia," he said. "Would you sit?" Dinner was careful, everyone choosing words like stepping stones. Halfway through, he set down his fork and looked straight at me. "I've been thinking," he said. "And I owe you apologies." "Not one. Several." He didn't list them, didn't explain. I nodded. That was enough. Mom reached across the table and touched my hand. "We thought we were protecting you, but maybe we were just shielding ourselves." I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I stopped sharing because every time I tried, you turned it into something smaller." I needed to protect what I'd built. Ethan, quieter than usual, added, "We made it hard for you to be honest." "That's on us." No one cried, but something softened, just enough to let the room breathe. The truth is, I hadn't planned to tell them. The rest. Some stories stay buried for good reasons. But seeing them there, trying in their imperfect way to rebuild bridges, I realized the final piece needed light. "There's something else you should know," I said. Their faces shifted, bracing. For more hidden years, more achievements kept in shadow. "The Tainan incident Admiral Hayes mentioned," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "It wasn't just an intelligence operation." Dad's expression changed. The Tainan incident had been in the news briefly 2 years ago, a potential conflict in the South China Sea that somehow de-escalated overnight. The details had been classified. Our carrier group was tracking unusual movement, I continued. Standard monitoring turned into something else when we intercepted communications suggesting an imminent provocation. Not just posturing, an actual strike designed to force our hand. I took a sip of water, feeling the weight of what came next. I was running the intelligence hub when we lost contact with 3 of our forward assets simultaneously. Complete blackout. Protocol said to assume compromise and withdraw immediately. Ethan leaned forward slightly. This was the language he understood, the field decisions, the weight of command. But something felt wrong about the pattern. I said. The timing was too perfect. So instead of following protocol, I made a call. Dad's eyes narrowed. He knew what this meant. Overriding standard procedure was career-ending if you were wrong. I redirected resources, deployed a network I'd been quietly building for months. It wasn't authorized yet, still in testing. But I activated it. Anyway. Mom's hand tightened around her glass. Was that allowed? A small smile crossed my lips. Not even slightly. "What happened?" Ethan asked. "We discovered the blackout was manufactured. Someone was feeding false data into our systems, making it look like our assets had gone dark when they hadn't. They were trying to bait us into a mistaken withdrawal that would have left a critical position exposed." Dad's military mind connected the dots immediately. "A trap." I nodded. "A sophisticated one. By using my unauthorized network, we maintained true visibility. We could see what was actually happening while letting them think their deception was working." "And that's what Hayes meant," Dad said slowly. "You saved his carrier group. We prevented an international incident that could have escalated quickly. But I also violated about 17 protocols doing it. I was prepared to lose my commission over it." The room was silent for a moment. Instead, I continued, "I was called to Washington. I thought it was for a court-martial. It was for a promotion ceremony. That's when I became commander." Dad set his napkin down carefully. "Why didn't you tell us then?" The question hung in the air, honest in a way he'd never been with me before. "Because I was tired of trying to make myself small enough to fit in this house," I said finally. "And because by then, it didn't matter if you knew." He nodded, accepting this hard truth without argument for the first time in my life. Later, as Daniel and I prepared to leave, Dad walked us to the door. He seemed to be wrestling with something. Finally, he turned to me. "The Mitchell name," he said, "has always meant one thing to me. But you've made it mean something else entirely." He hesitated. "Something better, maybe." I met his eyes. "I didn't do it for the name, Dad." "I know," he said. "That's what makes you who you are." It would be nice if that dinner fixed everything, if one moment of recognition erased decades of invisibility. But real life isn't that tidy. Families don't heal in montages. The weeks after were awkward. Mom called too often, trying too hard. Dad sent articles about naval intelligence operations, his way of showing interest. Ethan texted jokes that fell flat, then real questions that mattered. We were all learning a new language. I flew back to my station in Virginia, returned to the work that had become my center. Daniel came with me this time, his research grant allowing him to work remotely. We found an apartment near the water, started building something that felt like home. 3 months later, I received orders for a new assignment, heading a special intelligence task force focused on emerging cyber threats. It was a step up, a vote of confidence from the highest levels. The same day, an invitation arrived from my parents. Thanksgiving dinner. The card was simple, no fancy calligraphy, just Mom's handwriting, "We'd love to see you both. No uniforms necessary." I stared at it for a long time. Daniel watched me from across the room. "Are we going?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. That night, I called Commander Reeves, now Captain Reeves, the woman who had dropped that laptop on my hospital tray years ago and changed my course. "I need some perspective," I told her after we'd caught up. "On the new assignment?" she asked. "On family," I said, and explained the invitation, the history, the complicated space we were trying to navigate. She was quiet for a moment. "You know, Mitchell, in our line of work, we're trained to see patterns. To recognize when something doesn't fit the established intelligence. To adjust our assessment when new information comes in." I waited, knowing she was going somewhere with this. "People can be assessed the same way," she continued. "Your family had an intelligence failure. They built a profile based on limited data and stuck to it even when new information was available. Now they're trying to update their assessment. That's a very clinical way to look at it," I said. "Is it wrong?" she challenged. I thought about it. "No. But it doesn't account for the years in between." "True," she conceded. "But here's what I know about you, Mitchell. You've never backed down from hard things. You walked into Annapolis alone. You rebuilt yourself after your injury. You risked your career to save lives during Tainan. Are you really going to let a Thanksgiving dinner be the thing that scares you off?" Put that way, it seemed ridiculous. "Besides," she added, "if it goes badly, you can always leave. You've done it before." After we hung up, I told Daniel we were going. He nodded, unsurprised. He'd known before I did. 2 weeks later, we drove up to the house, the same house with its flag on the porch and its military history hanging on the walls. But something was different. When we walked in, I noticed it immediately. The photos had changed. Among the familiar ones of Ethan in his uniform and Dad receiving commendations, there were new additions. A photo of me at my academy graduation. Another of me receiving my first commendation, one of the few ceremonies that hadn't been classified. They'd found them somewhere, dug them out of old files or called someone who might have them. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Dinner was different too. Mom didn't just ask about Daniel's work, she actually listened to his answers about his research in sustainable engineering. Dad talked about a book he was reading on the history of naval intelligence operations. Ethan mentioned a colleague who had worked with me briefly, spoke of her respect for my leadership. Small things. Attempts at bridge building. After dinner, Dad invited me into his study, the same study I'd been caught in as a child, decoding ciphers when I should have been sleeping. "There's something I want to show you," he said, opening a drawer in his desk. He pulled out a yellowed piece of paper, carefully unfolded it, and laid it on the desk. It was the cipher I had solved that night, the one he had laughed at. My childish handwriting covered the page, the solution circled at the bottom. "You kept it," I said, surprised. "I did." He looked uncomfortable, struggling with words that didn't come easily to a man who gave orders his whole life. I was wrong that night. I knew it as soon as I left the room. "Then why, fear," he said simply. "I looked at you sitting there, solving something that took me weeks to crack when I was in training, and I was afraid." "Of what?" "Of what it would mean for you. This life isn't easy, Olivia. I'd seen what it did to people, the sacrifices, the costs. I thought if I discouraged you hard enough, you'd find something safer. Something that wouldn't ask so much of you." I touched the paper gently. "You tried to protect me by making me feel small." He nodded, the acknowledgement clearly painful. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I was wrong. It wasn't a perfect apology. It didn't erase the years between. But it was honest in a way he'd never been with me before. I'm proud of you, he said finally. Not because of your rank or what Hayes said. Because you had the courage to become who you are, even when I gave you every reason not to. Later that night, as Daniel and I drove back to our hotel, I was quiet, processing. You okay? He asked. I'm not sure, I answered truthfully. It's a lot to take in. They're trying, he observed. They are. I just don't know if it's enough. Does it need to be enough right now, he asked. Or can it just be a beginning? I thought about that for a long time. About beginnings and the courage they require. About how the hardest intelligence to gather is sometimes the truth about ourselves and the people we come from. 3 days later, I was in my office when a secure message came through. New deployment orders. The Cyber Threat Task Force was being accelerated in response to credible intelligence about potential threats to critical infrastructure. I would be leaving in a week. The assignment was classified, another piece of my life I couldn't share fully with my family. The old pattern. Threatening to repeat. I sat at my desk, staring at the orders, thinking about patterns and how hard they are to break. Then I picked up the phone and did something I'd never done before. I called my father. I'm being deployed, I said when he answered. I can't tell you where or what for. But I wanted you to hear it from me, not silence. There was a pause. On the other end. Then, thank you for telling me, Commander. The use of my rank wasn't lost on me. It was his way of acknowledging who I was, not who he'd wanted me to be. When you return, he said, your mother and I would like to visit. If that would be acceptable to you and Daniel. Formal, still. But genuine. I'd like that, I said. As I prepared for deployment, packing the essentials for a mission I couldn't discuss, I thought about the long road that had brought me here. About the girl who sat in her father's study decoding ciphers by lamplight. About the young woman who boarded a train alone, headed for Annapolis. About the officer who made a call that saved lives, even when protocol said otherwise. I thought about how we become who we are, not in single dramatic moments, but in the quiet choices we make. When no one is watching. How we build ourselves in silence until the day someone finally sees. The night before I left, I received a small package. Inside was a plain wooden box with a Navy insignia carved into the lid. When I opened it, I found a set of Commander's insignia, polished to a shine. Beneath them was a note in my father's handwriting. These were mine, from when I made Commander. They belong to you now. Come home safe. We'll be waiting. I ran my fingers over the insignia, feeling the weight of them. Not just metal, but history. Not just history, but legacy. A legacy I was redefining with every step. As I packed them carefully in my deployment bag, I realized something important. Being seen isn't about grand revelations or dramatic moments of recognition. It's about the quiet acknowledgement of truth. It's about making space for who someone really is, not who you expected them to be. My family was learning that lesson, slowly and imperfectly. And so was I. The next morning, as I prepared to leave for a mission I couldn't discuss, Daniel drove me to the base. At the security checkpoint, I was surprised to see 3 figures. Waiting, my mother, my father, and Ethan. They stood together, not in a formal line like they might have once, but in a loose group. Dad wasn't in a suit, Mom wasn't wearing pearls, and Ethan wasn't in uniform. They were just there, as themselves. I approached, confused. How did you know? Ethan called in a favor, Dad said. Just to know when, not where or why. I nodded, appreciating the respect for boundaries, the acknowledgement of my separate life. We wanted to see you off properly, Mom said, her eyes bright but steady. Even if we don't know where you're going. Ethan stepped forward, offered his hand. When I took it, he pulled me into a brief, awkward hug. Do what you do best out there, sis. When I reached my father, he didn't try to hug me. Instead, he saluted, crisp and formal. Commander. I returned the salute, equally precise. Captain. Then he broke protocol and extended his hand. When I took it, his grip was firm, his eyes clear. I'm still learning, he said quietly. But I'm trying to see you now. It wasn't everything. It wasn't perfect. But as I walked through the security gate toward my waiting team, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but its possibility. A beginning. And sometimes, a beginning is enough. 6 months into my deployment, I Stood in a windowless room halfway around the world from home, surrounded by screens displaying data only a handful of people had clearance to see. My team of 12 intelligence specialists worked in focused silence, the only sounds the click of keyboards and the low hum of servers. We'd been tracking a sophisticated network of cyber threats for months, not random hackers, but a coordinated effort targeting critical military infrastructure. The kind of attack that could disable communications, blind satellites, and leave vessels vulnerable in contested waters. "Commander, we've got something," Lieutenant Park called from her station. "Pattern match on the signature we've been hunting." I moved to her terminal, scanning the data scrolling across her screen. The code fragments matched what we'd been searching for, the digital fingerprint of an elusive adversary we'd only glimpsed before. "How confident are we on attribution?" I asked. 87% match to the Tainan incident protocols, she replied. "Same architectural approach, but evolved." I felt a chill. The Tainan incident had nearly triggered an international crisis. If the same actors were behind this new threat, we were dealing with something potentially catastrophic. "Push it to the main display," I ordered. "Everyone, eyes up." The team gathered as the data filled the central screen. For the next 4 hours, we dissected the threat, mapping its architecture, tracing its origins, developing countermeasures. This was the work I loved, the chess match of prediction and prevention, staying 3 moves ahead of an adversary who didn't know we were watching. By midnight, we had a preliminary defense strategy and had alerted key installations about the potential vulnerability. I sent the team to rest in shifts, knowing tomorrow would be longer. Alone in the command center, I pulled up a secure terminal to draft my report to headquarters. As I documented our findings, I thought about how far I'd come from that girl in her father's study, decoding simple ciphers by lamplight. Now I was leading a team safeguarding entire fleets. My secure phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. It was morning where he was. "Miss you. Hope you're saving the world or something equally important to justify being away this long." I smiled. His humor had been my anchor during this deployment. The messages were brief, necessarily vague on my part, but they connected me to the life waiting beyond these classified walls. "Working on it," I texted back. "How's the project?" "Breaking ground next month. University approved the full funding." His sustainable engineering research was finally moving from theory to implementation, a pilot program that could transform how military bases handled resource management. I felt a surge of pride. "Celebrate when I'm back?" I wrote. "It's a date. Any idea when that might be?" I hesitated. Still fluid. "Soon, I hope. I'll be here." 2 simple words that carried more weight than elaborate promises. In a life filled with uncertainty, Daniel's steadiness was the counterbalance I needed. I returned to my report, adding details about the encryption patterns we'd identified. As I worked, my mind drifted to the last communication I'd had with my family, a brief video call 3 weeks ago. The connection had been poor, the conversation somewhat stilted, but they had tried. Mom showed me the garden she was replanting. Dad mentioned an article about naval intelligence he thought I might find interesting. Ethan talked about his new assignment training junior officers. Small talk, ordinary moments, the kind of conversation most families take for granted. For us, it was still new territory, still somewhat uncomfortable. But they were trying. So was I. My phone buzzed again, not Daniel this time, but an alert from our monitoring system. New activity on the network we were tracking. I put personal thoughts aside and focused on the immediate threat. The world beyond these walls would have to wait. 2 weeks later, everything changed. It began as a routine morning briefing. Admiral Hayes had joined our secure video call, unusual, but not unprecedented given the sensitivity of our operation. He listened as I outlined our latest findings, his expression growing more serious with each slide. When I finished, he leaned toward the camera. "Commander Mitchell, how quickly can your team compile a comprehensive briefing package on this threat?" "We have most of it assembled already, sir. With proper redaction for security levels, we could have it ready in 24 hours. Make it 12. I need you to present this personally to the Joint Chiefs." The room fell silent. "Sir? This goes beyond our initial assessment, Commander. What you've uncovered has implications for national security at the highest level. I'm pulling you and your core team back to Washington immediately. Transport is being arranged as we speak." I felt every eye in the room on me. "Understood, sir." And Mitchell, he added, his tone shifting slightly, prepare for significant attention. This briefing won't just be military. There will be civilian leadership present as well. The call ended, leaving us in stunned silence. Lieutenant Park spoke first. Did he just say the Joint Chiefs? And civilian leadership, added Chief Specialist Ramirez. That means? It means we have 12 hours to prepare the most important briefing of our careers, I said, cutting off speculation. Let's get to work. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of activity. We boarded a military transport flight, worked throughout the journey, landed at Andrews Air Force Base, and were immediately escorted to secure quarters at the Pentagon. Sleep was an afterthought, replaced by endless revisions and security reviews of our presentation materials. Through it all, I maintained outward calm, but inside, I felt the weight of what was coming. This wasn't just about the operation anymore. This was about standing in front of the highest military and government officials and delivering information that could shape national security policy. I thought about calling my father, not for advice, exactly, but because for the first time, I was stepping into a room he had once occupied. But the security protocols surrounding our arrival made personal communications impossible. This moment would be mine alone. The morning of the briefing, I stood in front of the mirror in my temporary quarters, adjusting my uniform. The commander's insignia caught the light, the same ones my father had sent me, now properly positioned on my shoulders. I straightened my jacket, checked that every ribbon and medal was perfectly aligned, and took a deep breath. A knock at the door signaled it was time. Admiral Hayes himself had come to escort me. Ready, Commander? He asked. Yes, sir. As we walked through the Pentagon's labyrinthine corridors, he spoke quietly. You've come a long way from that injured cadet at Annapolis. I glanced at him, surprised. You remember that? Commander Reeves kept me informed. She said you were one to watch. He paused. She was right. Before I could respond, we reached a security checkpoint. Beyond it lay the briefing room where the Joint Chiefs and others were already gathering. Hayes stopped, turned to me. In that room are people who can determine the course of national security for years to come. They need to hear exactly what you've found, without sugarcoating or embellishment. Can you deliver that, Commander? Yes, sir. He nodded once, satisfied. Then let's proceed. The briefing room fell silent as we entered. Around the table sat the highest-ranking military leaders in the nation, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Service Branch Commanders, the Secretary of Defense. At the far end, flanked by security personnel, was a figure I recognized immediately from news broadcasts, the President's National Security Advisor. Admiral Hayes made brief introductions, then stepped aside. Commander Mitchell will lead the briefing on the cyber threat assessment. All eyes turned to me. In that moment, I thought of every person who had ever underestimated me, from my father who thought I'd wash out of Annapolis to the cadets who tampered with my equipment. To every officer who assumed my position was due to quotas rather than capability. None of them were in this room. I was. Good morning, I began, my voice steady. For the past 6 months, my team has been tracking a sophisticated cyber operation targeting our naval defense systems. What we've uncovered is not simply an isolated threat, but evidence of a coordinated campaign designed to compromise our operational security across multiple theaters. For the next 45 minutes, I laid out our findings in precise, technical detail, the attack vectors, the encryption methods, the potential vulnerabilities, and our recommended countermeasures. I answered questions directly, acknowledged uncertainties where they existed, and pushed back respectfully when assumptions were made that didn't align with our intelligence. As the briefing concluded, the National Security Advisor spoke for the first time. Commander Mitchell, your assessment contradicts what we've been hearing from certain intelligence agencies. Why should we give your analysis more weight? The room tensed. It was a direct challenge, and everyone knew it. I met her gaze steadily. With respect, ma'am, our analysis is based on direct observation of the threat as it's evolved over time. We've been tracking these signatures since the Tainan incident, which my team helped resolve. The patterns are consistent, but the techniques have advanced. If other agencies are seeing different indicators, I would welcome the opportunity to review that intelligence and integrate it into our assessment. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slightly. I'd like a follow-up briefing with your team and the relevant agency directors. Admiral Hayes can coordinate. Yes, ma'am. The Secretary of Defense leaned forward. Commander, if your assessment is accurate, we need to adjust our defensive posture immediately. How quickly can your team implement the countermeasures you've outlined? Initial protocols can be deployed within 48 hours. Full implementation across all affected systems would take approximately 2 weeks. Make it 1 week, he said. You'll have whatever resources you need. Understood, sir. As the meeting adjourned, various officials approached with questions or comments. I answered each one professionally, maintaining the composed demeanor that had become my hallmark. Inside, though, I was processing what had just happened. I had briefed the highest levels of military and civilian leadership, and they had not only listened but changed course based on my assessment. Admiral Hayes found me as the room cleared. Well done, Commander. Very well done. Thank you, sir. They've requested you stay in Washington to oversee the implementation of the countermeasures. I've already approved the temporary reassignment. I nodded, already thinking through the logistics, the team members I'd need, the systems we'd prioritize. There's one more thing, he added. The secretary has recommended you for promotion. It's not official yet, but I thought you should know. I blinked, surprised. Promotion? To captain. He smiled slightly at my expression. You've earned it, Mitchell. The formal announcement will come after the countermeasures are implemented. Assuming all goes well. Captain. The rank my father had held when he retired. The rank that, in our family, had always been spoken with reverence. Thank you, sir, I said, finding my voice. I appreciate your confidence. It's not about confidence. It's about results. He checked his watch. There's a secure phone. In the anteroom if you need to make any calls. We reconvene at 1400 to begin implementation planning. Left alone, I stood for a moment, absorbing what had just happened. Then I made my way to the anteroom and picked up the secure phone. Daniel answered on the second ring. Hello? It's me, I said. Liv? Where are you? Your last message said. You were still deployed. I'm in Washington. It's complicated. I can't say much. Are you okay? Concern filled his voice. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I hesitated, then decided some news could be shared. I just briefed the Joint Chiefs and the National Security Advisor. Silence, then, holy shit. I laughed, tension breaking. That's classified information, Professor. Noted. How did it go? They listened. And I'm being promoted. To captain. Another pause. Your father's rank. Yes. He should know, Liv. I sighed. Daniel had always been the one pushing me toward reconciliation, believing my family capable of change when I had my doubts. It's not official yet. Still. I glanced at the clock. I'll think about it. I have to go soon, another meeting. When will you be home? I don't know. I'm being temporarily reassigned to Washington to oversee a project. Could be weeks. I could come there, he offered. The university break starts next week. The thought of seeing him after months apart was tempting. Let me see how things develop here first. I'll call when I can. After we hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand, thinking about Daniel's suggestion to call my father. It wasn't just about sharing news of a promotion. It was about crossing a bridge I'd been reluctant to fully traverse. Before I could reconsider, I dialed the number. My mother answered, her surprise evident. Olivia? Is everything all right? Everything's fine, Mom. Is Dad there? Yes, he's in his study. Hold on. A moment later, my father's voice came through. Olivia? Hi, Dad. This is unexpected. Your mother said you were still deployed. I was. I'm in Washington now. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I just briefed the Joint Chiefs on an operation my team has been running. Silence on the other end. I could almost see him processing this information, adjusting his understanding of my position. The Joint Chiefs, he repeated finally. That's significant. Yes. What was their response? They've authorized immediate implementation of our recommended countermeasures. I'm staying in Washington to oversee it. Good. That's good work, Olivia. I took a breath. There's something else. Admiral Hayes informed me that I'm being recommended for promotion to captain. The silence this time was longer, heavier. Dad? I'm here. His voice had changed, become softer somehow. Captain Mitchell. It's not official yet, I clarified. Just a recommendation at this point. Still. He cleared his throat. Your grandfather would have been proud. He always said the Mitchell name belonged in the captain's chair. I hadn't expected him to invoke my grandfather, the patriarch, whose naval legacy had shaped our family's identity for generations. I didn't do it for the name, I said, echoing words I'd said to him before. I know, he replied. That's why you deserve it. We talked for a few minutes more, brief, still somewhat formal, but without the old barriers. As we prepared to end the call, he said something that stayed with me. Olivia, when I was your age, I thought success meant following a predetermined path, achieving the expected. You've shown me there's more courage in charting your own course. Coming from my father, it was as close to a benediction as I could imagine. The next 3 weeks were among the most intense of my career. I led a task force implementing enhanced security protocols across naval communication systems worldwide. The work was exacting, the pressure immense, the stakes nothing less than national security. Through it all, I found myself drawing on everything I'd learned, not just the technical skills and strategic thinking from my training, but the persistence I'd developed pushing through injury at Annapolis, the resilience forged during years of family dismissal, the quiet confidence built in commanding operations no one knew about. Each challenge that had once seemed an obstacle had actually been preparation. Daniel arrived in Washington midway through the implementation phase. Having him there, waiting in my temporary apartment at the end of grueling 16-hour days. Understanding when I couldn't discuss what I was working on, bringing normalcy to an extraordinary situation, grounded me in ways I hadn't realized I needed. One night, returning past midnight, I found him asleep on the couch, research papers scattered around him, glasses still on. I gently removed them, causing him to stir. Hey, he said groggily. How'd it go today? We're making progress. Pacific Fleet systems are secure now. He sat up, making space for me beside him. That's good, right? It's a start. I sank onto the couch, exhaustion finally catching up. Everyone's looking to me for answers, Daniel. Admirals and generals with 30 years' experience are deferring to my assessment. It's exactly where you should be, he finished. They recognize what I've always known. I looked at him questioningly. That you see patterns others miss. That you've always been 3 steps ahead. He smiled. That you were never the disappointment. You were just playing a different game. His words caught me off guard. The weight of the past weeks, the years before them, all of it suddenly felt present. What if I can't live up to it? I asked quietly, voicing the doubt I'd kept hidden from everyone else. You already have, he said simply. Every day since you decided your path wasn't going to be defined by what others expected. It was exactly what I needed to hear, not blind reassurance, but recognition of the journey that had brought me here. The countermeasure implementation was completed 2 days ahead of schedule. The vulnerability was secured, the threat contained, the Navy's critical systems protected. My team received commendations, and Admiral Hayes personally thanked each member. As we concluded our final briefing, he held me back as the others filed out. The promotion's been approved, he said without preamble. The ceremony is scheduled for next Friday. You're permitted to invite family if you wish. Captain Mitchell. It was really happening. Thank you, sir. I would like to invite them. He nodded. You've done exceptional work here, Mitchell. Not just with the technical implementation, but in how you've led your team through intense pressure. That's the mark of a true officer. That evening, I called my parents. Then Ethan. Then Commander Reeves, now Captain Reeves, the mentor who had seen potential in an injured cadet years ago. As I made each call, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, from the girl hiding in her father's study to the officer leading critical national security operations. It hadn't been a straight line. There had been injuries and setbacks, dismissals and discoveries, moments of doubt and decisions to persist. But each step, even the painful ones, had shaped me into the leader I had become. Each challenge had forced me to find strength I didn't know I possessed. Each dismissal had pushed me to prove my worth not to others, but to myself. And that, I realized, was the real achievement, not the rank or the recognition, but the person I had become in pursuing them. The disappointment who became commander. The commander who would soon be captain. The woman who had found her own path, even when no one believed it possible. The morning of my promotion ceremony dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect Washington spring day that makes even the Pentagon look less imposing. I stood at the window of my temporary quarters, watching the early light play across the Potomac, trying to center myself for what was coming. On the bed lay my dress uniform, immaculate and waiting. Soon it would bear the 4 bars of a Navy captain, the rank my father had worn, the rank my grandfather had worn before him. But my path to it had been different from theirs in every possible way. I heard Daniel stir behind me. "Nervous?" he asked, his voice still rough with sleep. "Not nervous," I said, turning to him. "Just processing." He smiled, understanding. "As always. Big day." "Not just the ceremony," I admitted. "Having everyone here together, my family, my team, Admiral Hayes. All these different chapters of my life in one room." Daniel got up, came to stand beside me at the window. "You know what I think? I think they'll finally see what I've always seen." "What's that?" "The real Olivia Mitchell." He brushed a strand of hair from my face. "The one who never needed anyone's permission to be extraordinary." I leaned into him briefly, drawing strength from his steadiness. Then I straightened, ready to begin the day. "I should get ready. They're sending a car at 0900. "I'll make coffee," he said, heading for the small kitchenette. As I showered and prepared, I thought about who would be at the ceremony. My parents, flying in from Charleston. Ethan, taking leave from his current assignment. Captain Reeves, my first real mentor. Admiral Hayes and the team I'd led for the past 6 months. Senior Pentagon officials. Possibly even some of the Joint Chiefs. A collection of people who had shaped my journey, for better or worse. Those who had believed in me from the start. Those who had only recently recognized what I was capable of. Those who had once dismissed me entirely. By 08:30, I was dressed and ready. The uniform felt different today, not just a symbol of rank and duty, but a physical manifestation of the path I'd chosen and the obstacles I'd overcome to walk it. Daniel emerged from the bedroom in his suit, looking more professor-like than usual with his hair neatly combed. He paused when he saw me, his expression softening. "What?" I asked. "Nothing. Just." He smiled. "Captain Mitchell." The car arrived precisely at 0900, a black sedan with a junior officer as driver. As we headed toward the Pentagon, I gazed out at the Washington landmarks sliding past. The monuments and memorials, the seat of government, the heart of military command, all places where decisions were made that shaped the world. Now I was part of that machinery in a way I'd never anticipated. We arrived at the Pentagon ceremonial entrance, where an aide was waiting to escort us to the venue. As we walked the corridors, I noticed people glancing at me, some nodding in recognition. Word of our operation had spread, at least within certain circles. The ceremony was being held in one of the Pentagon's formal halls, a wood-paneled room with high ceilings and military flags lining the walls. When we entered, it was already half full with uniformed personnel and a few civilians. I spotted my team first, Lieutenant Park, Chief Ramirez, and the others, seated together in crisp uniforms. They straightened as I entered, pride evident in their posture. These were the people who had worked alongside me in that windowless room halfway around the world, who had seen firsthand what we had accomplished together. Then I saw my family. They were standing near the front, looking somewhat out of place amid the military precision around them. My mother in a blue dress I'd never seen before, my father in a dark suit with his veteran's pin on the lapel, Ethan in his service dress blues. As I approached, my mother's eyes widened. I realized she was seeing me in full dress uniform for the first time in years, seeing not just the daughter she'd raised, but the officer I'd become. "Olivia," she said softly, reaching for my hands. "You look official?" I suggested with a small smile. "Formidable," she finished, and I heard the pride in her voice, real pride, not the polite acknowledgement of past years. My father stood slightly apart, his posture military straight despite his civilian clothes. His eyes moved over my uniform, noting each ribbon and medal, each marker of service and achievement. "Commander," he said formally, then corrected himself. "Soon to be captain." I returned his gaze steadily. "Thank you for coming. We wouldn't have missed it." He hesitated, then added, "Your grandfather's captain's bars are in my pocket. If you'd like to use them today." It was an offering I hadn't expected, a tangible connection to the Mitchell naval legacy, one I'd always felt excluded from. Before I could respond, Admiral Hayes entered the room. Conversation hushed as he made his way toward the front, stopping briefly to speak with various officials. When he reached us, he nodded to my family. "Captain Mitchell," he said, addressing My father with immediate recognition. It's an honor to meet you. Your daughter has become one of our most valuable assets. My father shook his hand. The honor is mine, Admiral. And I'm just beginning to understand exactly what that means. Hayes turned to me. Ready, Commander? We'll begin in 5 minutes. Yes, sir. As he moved away, Ethan stepped closer. Not bad, sis, he said quietly. The Admiral knows Dad by sight. Hayes served under him briefly in the Gulf, I explained. Before he was an admiral. Still. Ethan adjusted his uniform slightly, a nervous habit I recognized from childhood. Listen, I know we haven't always. I was. It's okay, I said, saving him from the awkward apology. Different paths. He nodded, relieved. Different paths, same blood. Daniel, who had been giving us space for this family moment, rejoined us as an aide announced it was time to take our seats. He squeezed my hand briefly. See you on the other side, Captain. The ceremony itself was formal and precise, as military traditions always are. I stood at attention as Admiral Hayes spoke about service and leadership, about the responsibilities of command, about the specific achievements that had led to this promotion. Commander Mitchell's actions during the recent cybersecurity operation demonstrated the highest levels of technical expertise, strategic thinking, and leadership under pressure, he said. Her work has significantly enhanced our national security posture and represents the kind of forward-thinking leadership our modern Navy requires. Then came the moment itself. I stepped forward as my name was called. Admiral Hayes and a senior female officer, Captain Elena Rodriguez, someone I'd long admired from afar, stood ready to perform the ceremony. Attention to orders, Hayes announced, reading from the official promotion document. The room stood at attention as he detailed the authorization for my promotion to the rank of captain. Then he and Captain Rodriguez removed the commander's insignia from my shoulders and replaced them with the 4 bars of a Navy captain. As they did, I felt the weight of the moment, not just the physical weight of the new insignia, but the responsibility it represented. Captain Mitchell, Hayes said formally, offering the first salute to my new rank. I returned it precisely, feeling a shift inside me as I did, the final acknowledgement of a journey that had begun years ago in my father's study, decoding ciphers by lamplight. The room applauded as Hayes invited me to say a few words. I stepped to the podium, looking out at the assembled faces, my team, my family, my superiors, my peers. All the strands of my life gathered in one place. Thank you, Admiral Hayes. I began. It is an honor to accept this promotion and the responsibilities that come with it. I paused, considering what to say next. I could give the standard speech about duty and service. But standing there, seeing my family in the front row, I knew I needed to speak a different truth. I stand here today because of many people in this room. My team, who worked tirelessly on our recent operation. My mentors, who saw potential even when I doubted it myself. I glanced at Captain Reeves, who nodded slightly in acknowledgement. But I also stand here because of a journey that began long before I put on this uniform. A journey that wasn't always straight or smooth or clearly marked. I looked directly at my parents, then at Ethan. We don't always recognize the paths others are meant to walk. Sometimes we mistake difference for weakness, questioning for rebellion, uniqueness for failure. I know I experienced that. I know many of us have. The room was silent, attentive in a way that went beyond military courtesy. What I've learned is that leadership isn't about fitting a predetermined mold. It's about bringing your whole self to the mission, your unique perspective, your distinctive strengths, even the struggles that shaped you. Especially those. I gestured to my team. The operation we just completed succeeded not because we followed the established playbook, but because we were willing to see patterns others missed. Because we approached problems from angles others hadn't considered. Because diversity of thought is actually our greatest strategic advantage. I returned my gaze to my family. I want to thank my parents and my brother for being here today. Our path hasn't always been easy, but your presence means more than I can express. Then to Daniel. And my partner, Daniel, whose unwavering support has been my foundation through every challenge. Finally, I addressed the entire room. As I accept this promotion, I commit to leading with both strength and authenticity. To recognizing potential in unexpected places. And to remembering that sometimes, the most valuable assets are those we almost overlooked. I stepped back from the podium to appreciative applause. As I returned to my position, I caught my father's eye. He was sitting straighter than before, his expression a complex mix of pride and something that looked almost like awe. The ceremony concluded with formal congratulations from various officials. As the crowd began to disperse, moving toward the reception area, my team approached as a group. Lieutenant Park stepped forward. "Permission to speak freely, Captain?" "Always, Lieutenant." She smiled. "We had a small wager going during our deployment about whether you'd make captain before age 35. I just won." I laughed, surprised by the break in formality. "Glad I could help, Lieutenant." "In all seriousness, ma'am," Chief Ramirez added, "it's been an honor serving under your command. You showed us what leadership really means." One by one, they offered congratulations before moving toward the reception. Captain Reeves was next, her handshake firm as always. "Well done, Mitchell," she said. "From hospital bed to captains. Bars in record time. I knew you had it in you." "You were one of the few who did," I replied honestly. She shrugged. "I recognize grit when I see it. And intelligence. And the rare ability to think 3 moves ahead." She glanced toward my family, who were waiting a discreet distance away. "Go be with your family. We'll talk soon about your next assignment." As she moved away, my parents approached, Ethan and Daniel slightly behind them. "That was quite a speech," my father said. "I meant every word," I replied. He nodded slowly. "I know you did." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "These were going to be a gift, but you might not need them now." I opened the box. Inside lay a pair of captain's bars, worn with age but polished to a shine. My grandfather's, as he'd mentioned earlier. "He wore these in the Pacific," my father said quietly. "I wore them in the Gulf. They're yours now, if you want them." I looked at the insignia, feeling the weight of history they carried. Once, I might have rejected them, seeing them as symbols of a legacy that had excluded me. Now, I understood they were part of my story too, not the whole of it, but a chapter worth honoring. "Thank you," I said, closing the box carefully. "I'll treasure them." My mother stepped forward then, embracing me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "I'm so proud of you, Olivia," she whispered. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see." "It's okay, Mom," I said, returning her embrace. "We're here now." Ethan offered a crisp salute, then broke into a grin. "Captain Mitchell. Dad's going to have to specify which one he's talking about now." I laughed. "I suspect he'll manage." As we moved toward the reception, Daniel at my side, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. Not because the journey was over, it was just beginning in many ways, but because the pieces of my life no longer felt disconnected. The reception was held in an adjacent room, where refreshments had been arranged and small groups were forming in conversation. As captain now, I had responsibilities to circulate, to speak with senior officers, to acknowledge congratulations from colleagues. But first, I found a quiet moment with Daniel. "So," he said, handing me a glass of champagne, "how does it feel?" I considered the question seriously. "Different than I expected. Less about the rank itself and more about the recognition," he suggested. "The integration," I corrected. "All these parts of my life coming together, the work, the family history, the personal journey. For the first time, it doesn't feel like I'm living in separate worlds." He nodded, understanding as always. "That's what happens when you stop hiding pieces of yourself. When you insist on being seen fully." It wasn't just about being seen, I reflected. It was about seeing myself clearly first. Before he could respond, Admiral Hayes approached with a senior civilian I recognized immediately, the National Security Advisor who had challenged me during the Joint Chiefs briefing. "Captain Mitchell," Hayes said. "Ms. Winters has specifically asked to speak with you." The National Security Advisor extended her hand. "Congratulations on your promotion, Captain. Your work on the cybersecurity operation was exceptional." "Thank you, ma'am. I'll be direct. We're forming a special task force to address emerging hybrid threats to national security. Based on your performance during the recent operation, I'd like you to consider joining it." I blinked, surprised by the directness of the offer. What would that entail, exactly? A temporary assignment to the National Security Council. Interagency work, primarily focused on developing a comprehensive strategy for defending against sophisticated cyber operations like the one you just countered. It was an extraordinary opportunity, the kind of position that could shape national policy, that would place me at the intersection of military, intelligence, and civilian leadership. The assignment would begin in 3 weeks, she continued. Admiral Hayes has already indicated he would support the temporary transfer if you're interested. I glanced at Hayes, who nodded confirmation. It's an important assignment, Captain. One suited to your particular skills. I'd be honored to consider it, I said carefully. May I have some time to discuss it with my family? Of course, Ms. Winters replied. I'll have my office send the details tomorrow. We can speak again next week. As they moved away, Daniel raised an eyebrow. The National Security Council? That's unexpected, I finished. Actually, I was going to say, exactly where you belong. He smiled. But I appreciate you wanting to discuss it. It would mean moving to Washington, at least temporarily, I said. Your research can continue anywhere, he finished. The university has already approved my sabbatical request for next year. I was going to surprise you. I stared at him. You knew this might happen? I knew something would happen, he corrected. You've been on an upward trajectory since the day I met you. I just made sure I'd be ready to move with you when the time came. Before I could respond, I noticed my father standing alone near one of the large windows, looking out over the Potomac. On impulse, I excused myself and went to join him. Everything okay, Dad? I asked, coming to stand beside him. Just taking a moment, he said. It's been a day of recalibration. I waited, sensing he had more to say. You know, when I was your age, I thought I knew exactly what success looked like in our family, he continued. What the Mitchell name meant. The path it required. He turned to look at me fully. I was wrong, Olivia. So wrong. Dad. Let me finish. His voice was gentle but firm. What you've accomplished, not just the rank, but the kind of leader you've become, it's beyond anything I imagined. And you did it by charting your own course, even when I tried to redirect you to the one I thought was right. He gestured toward the room behind us, where my team members were mingling with senior officers, where the National Security Advisor was engaged in conversation with Admiral Hayes. These people respect you not because you followed tradition, but because you brought something new to it. Something uniquely yours. He shook his head slightly. I wish I had seen it sooner. It took me time to see it too, I admitted. To trust that my different approach had value. More than value, he said. From what Hayes tells me, it's been essential. He paused. I heard about the National Security Council offer. News travels fast. It's a remarkable opportunity. It would mean staying in Washington, I said. Being further from Charleston. He smiled slightly. Your mother and I have been discussing that, actually. This might be the right time for a change of scenery. My consulting work can be done from anywhere, and your mother has always wanted to spend more time near the capital's museums. I stared at him, processing the implication. You'd move to Washington? We're considering it, he said carefully. If that wouldn't be an imposition. The gesture was so unexpected, so contrary to the distant father I'd known, that for a moment I couldn't respond. It wouldn't be an imposition, I said finally. It would be nice. He nodded, satisfied. Good. We'll discuss it more before you make your decision. As he turned to rejoin the reception, I remained by the window, watching the afternoon light play across the river. So much had changed since that day in my father's study, decoding ciphers by lamplight. So much would continue to change in the years ahead. The path hadn't been straight or easy. There had been injuries and setbacks, dismissals and discoveries, moments of doubt and decisions to persist. But each step, even the painful ones, had been necessary. Each challenge had revealed strength I didn't know I possessed. Each dismissal had pushed me to prove my worth not to others, but to myself. And that, I realized, was the real achievement. Not the rank or the recognition, but the woman I had become in pursuing them. Not Captain Mitchell of the illustrious naval family, but Olivia, who had found her own definition of service and leadership. I thought of the words I'd spoken during the ceremony. Leadership isn't about fitting a predetermined mold. It's about bringing your whole self to the mission. That had been my journey, learning to bring my whole self to each challenge, each opportunity, each relationship. Learning to stand in my truth, even when others couldn't see it. Learning that the disappointment was never actually me, it was just a story others told because they couldn't see the path I was forging. As I turned to rejoin the reception, to embrace the future opening before me, I carried that knowledge like a compass. Whatever came next, I would face it as myself. Fully seen. Completely present. No longer the disappointment. Now and always, Captain Mitchell. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.